Suppose there is a statute related to speed limits on certain type of road. Section 1 states that the maximum speed limit on the expressway is 60 miles per hour. Section 2 states that drivers on the expressway are required to follow the speed limit set by road signs. At the first glance, it might appear that Section 1 is in conflict with Section 2. If the maximum speed limit is 60 miles per hour according to Section 1, and drivers must follow the speed limits set by road signs according to Section 2, what happens if a road sign indicates a different speed limit? How would you interpret these sections? We will apply the doctrine of harmonious construction. This doctrine states that when there is a conflict between two or more statutes or between different parts or provisions of a statute, we should interpret them in a way that harmonizes them. This means that when there are inconsistencies, we should try to reconcile the conflicting parts so that one part does not negate the purpose of the other. In this scenario, one could interpret Section 2 to mean that drivers on the expressway must follow road signs, but if there are no road signs, the maximum speed limit for the drivers is 60 miles per hour mentioned in Section 1. This interpretation would harmonize the two sections by allowing road signs to modify the general speed limit without violating the statute. The doctrine of harmonious construction assumes that what Parliament gives with one hand, it does not intend to take away it with the other. The goal is to give effect to all the provisions. This rule evolved from the case Shankari Prasad vs. Union of India. The issue in the case was the conflict between Article 13(2) of the Constitution, which mentions that the state cannot make any law which takes away or abridges the fundamental rights, and Article 368 of the Indian Constitution, which gives Parliament the power to amend the Constitution. On one hand, Article 368 gave legislature the power to amend the Constitution. At the same time, Article 13(2) restricted the same. The Supreme Court in this case used the doctrine of harmonious construction in an attempt to resolve the conflicting provisions. It was concluded that the word law in Article 13(2) is for ordinary laws and not constitutional laws, thereby limiting the extent of law under Article 13(2). This also meant that the Parliament had exclusive power under Article 368 to amend the Constitution, including the fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Constitution. In the landmark case of CIT vs. Hindustan Bulk Carriers, the Supreme Court discussed few principles of harmonious construction. These include: a construction which reduces the statute to a futility has to be avoided. A statute or any enacting provision must be so construed to make it effective and operative on the principles expressed in the maxim, ut res magis valet quam pereat. The courts will have to reject that construction which will defeat the plain intention of the legislature. If the choice is between two interpretations, the narrower interpretation, which would fail to achieve the purpose of the legislation, should be avoided. The statute must be read as a whole, and one provision of the Act should be read in reference to the other provisions in the same Act so as to make a consistent enactment as a whole. Whenever it is possible to do so, the court must construe the provisions which appear to conflict in a manner so that they harmonize. The provisions of one section of the statute cannot be used to defeat another unless it is impossible to effect reconciliation between them. Thus, a construction that reduces one of the provisions to a useless lumber or dead letter is not a harmonized construction. Two maxims are used in the application of harmonious construction: Generalia specialibus non derogant and Generalia specialibus derogant. Generalia specialibus non derogant. General provisions do not derogate from special provisions. When there are general and special provisions in a legal system, the general provision does not override the special one in situations where they conflict. However, if the general law is enacted later in time than the special law, it can abrogate the special law if such intentions appear from the statute. Generalia specialibus derogant. General provisions yield to special provisions. In cases of conflict between a general law and a special law addressing a particular subject, the special law prevails. The specific provisions of the special law take precedence over the more general provisions of the general law for the specific matter. In the case of Sir Silk Limited vs. Government of Andhra Pradesh, Disputes between the workmen and the employer were brought before an industrial tribunal, and after adjudication, the award was sent for publication. But before the publication could take place, the parties reached a settlement and jointly communicated to the government, requesting that the award may not be published. However, the government rejected the request. Section 17 of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 mandated that the appropriate government must publish the award within 13 days of its receipt. When the case reached the Supreme Court, the court observed a conflict between Sections 17 and 18 of the Act. Section 18 stipulated that a settlement between the parties would be binding, but in the present case, as the award was also published, the same was also binding on the parties, thus creating a contradiction. Applying the doctrine of harmonious construction, the court held that if a settlement has been reached before the award is published, the government should refrain from publishing the award. MSM Sharma vs. Krishna and others. This case involved a journalist, MSM Sharma, who published a report containing deleted portions of a speech made in Bihar Legislative Assembly. The Assembly's Privileges Committee issued a notice to Sharma, prompting him to file a writ petition in the Supreme Court of India, arguing a violation of his fundamental rights to freedom of speech and expression. The court held that Article 194(3) of the Constitution granted the Bihar Legislative Assembly powers, privileges and immunities similar to those of House of Commons of the United Kingdom. The House of Commons had historically asserted the right to control and prohibit the publications of debates and proceedings. The Bihar Assembly had a similar power to prohibit the petitioner from publishing expunged portion of the speech. The court, emphasizing on the principle of harmonious construction, held that the specific provisions of Article 194(3) should take precedence over the general provisions of Article 19(1)(a) and upheld the Assembly's power to prohibit the publication of the deleted portions. Raj Krishna vs. Binod. In this case, a conflict arose between two provisions of the Representation of People's Act 1951. Section 33(2) allowed government servants to nominate or second a person in an election, while Section 123(8) stated that a government servant could not assist any candidate except by casting his vote. The court observed that both the provisions needed to be construed in a way that maintained harmony. It ruled that a government servant had the right to nominate or second a candidate seeking election in the state legislative assembly. The key to achieving harmony, according to the court, was to interpret Section 123(8) as granting the government servant the right to vote, nominate, or second a candidate but prohibiting any other form of assistance to the candidate. Hope you all liked and enjoyed the video.